The day I found 3 cars parked in my heated garage without permission was the day I realized that living in Meadowbrook Estates in suburban Minneapolis, Minnesota, had become a complete nightmare. I had just returned from a business trip to Chicago, exhausted and ready to pull into my garage to unload my luggage without freezing in the January cold. Minnesota winters are brutal, with temperatures regularly dropping below zero, and that particular week the wind chill was sitting at -20 degrees. When I pressed my garage door opener and saw 3 vehicles crammed into my 2.5-car garage, I thought I was losing my mind. My own truck sat in the driveway, covered in a thick layer of snow and ice because I had left it there before my trip, planning to drive my sedan. But that sedan was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a silver Lexus SUV, a white BMW sedan, and a black Mercedes occupied the space I paid for in the home I owned. I sat in my rental car, staring at the scene in complete disbelief. My garage was not just any garage. When I bought this house 2 years ago, I had spent $15,000 upgrading it with radiant floor heating, insulated doors, and a climate control system that kept it at a comfortable 55 degrees year-round. It was my workshop, my sanctuary, and most importantly, my property. I pulled out my phone and called the police non-emergency line. Within 30 minutes, Officer Martinez arrived, his patrol car pulling up behind me in the driveway. "Let me get this straight," he said, looking at his notepad. "You own this home and someone parked their cars in your garage." "3 cars," I corrected, "and I have no idea who they belong to." He walked up to the garage and peered inside. "These are expensive vehicles. You sure you did not give anyone permission? I have been in Chicago for 4 days. I gave nobody permission to use my garage." Officer Martinez ran the plates. All 3 vehicles were registered to different residents of Meadowbrook Estates. The Lexus belonged to Patricia Hoffman, the HOA president. The BMW was registered to Denise Murphy, the HOA vice president. The Mercedes belonged to Sharon Kelly, the HOA treasurer. "This is a civil matter," Officer Martinez said, "but I can knock on doors and ask them to move the vehicles. Please do." He made some calls, and within 15 minutes, Patricia Hoffman came marching down the street. She was exactly what I expected. A woman in her mid-50s with an asymmetrical blonde haircut, wearing a puffy North Face jacket and designer boots. Her face was already twisted in irritation before she even reached us. "What is the problem?" she demanded. "Madam, are you Patricia Hoffman?" Officer Martinez asked. "I am, and I am very busy. Your vehicle is parked in this gentleman's garage without permission." Patricia looked at me like I had personally offended her entire bloodline. "Austin Zimmerman, right? The new resident." "I have lived here 2 years," I said. "New enough," she snapped. "And there is no problem. The HOA board voted to use available heated garage space during the winter months. Your garage was frequently empty, so we made use of it." I blinked at her. "You what?" "The HOA has certain rights regarding property use for the collective benefit of the community. It is all in the bylaws." Officer Martinez cleared his throat. "Madam, unless you have written permission from the homeowner, you cannot park in his private garage." "I have HOA authority." "That is not how property rights work," I interjected, my voice rising. "Get your cars out of my garage right now." Patricia pulled out her phone. "We will see about this." She made a call, and within minutes, Denise Murphy and Sharon Kelly arrived. Both were cut from the same cloth as Patricia, middle-aged, entitled, and visibly annoyed that they had been summoned. "What is going on?" Denise asked. She had short brown hair and wore yoga pants despite the freezing temperature. Austin is refusing to allow the HOA to use his garage space, Patricia said. Sharon, a redhead with too much makeup, gasped dramatically. But we voted on this. You voted on using my property without asking me. I was nearly shouting now. Officer Martinez held up his hand. Ladies, you need to move your vehicles immediately or I will have them towed at your expense. The three women exchanged glances. Patricia's jaw clenched. Fine. But this is not over, Austin. We will be reviewing your property for violations. I can guarantee you have several. They moved their cars, each one taking their sweet time, making sure I knew they were unhappy. Once they were gone, Officer Martinez turned to me. Document everything, he said. These HOA disputes can get ugly. He had no idea how right he was. The next morning, I woke up to find a violation notice taped to my front door. According to the notice, my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. My holiday lights were still up 3 days past the January 15th deadline, and my lawn showed signs of improper winter care. Each violation carried a $50 fine. I took photos of every mailbox on the street. Half of them were different shades of black, gray, or even dark brown. My neighbors still had holiday lights up. And as for lawn care, we were in the middle of a Minnesota winter with 2 feet of snow on the ground. I called an attorney that afternoon. His name was Robert Chen, and he specialized in property law and HOA disputes. They are retaliating, Robert said after I explained the situation. And they were clearly trespassing. Do you have any documentation about this garage vote they claim happened? Nothing. I was never notified of any meeting or vote. Then they violated their own bylaws. HOA boards cannot make decisions that affect individual property rights without proper notice and approval from the affected homeowner. Send me everything you have, and I will draft a cease and desist letter. Over the next week, I received 4 more violation notices. My trash cans were visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. My driveway had ice melt residue. My doormat was not an approved color. The fines totaled $450. Robert sent the cease and desist letter. The HOA responded by calling an emergency meeting and voting to increase my annual HOA dues by $3,000 for excessive property maintenance requirements. Can they do that? I asked Robert during our next call. Not legally, no. This is clear discrimination and retaliation. We have grounds for a lawsuit. I do not want to sue. I just want them to leave me alone. Austin, they are not going to stop. These people believe they have ultimate authority over your property. We need to push back hard. I spent the weekend reading through every page of the HOA bylaws. They were dense, written in intentionally confusing legal language, but I found something interesting buried in Section 12, Subsection 4. Any HOA board member who misuses their position for personal gain, or who violates the property rights of homeowners, can be removed by a vote of no confidence, provided that 20% of homeowners sign a petition requesting a special election. Meadowbrook Estates had 120 homes. I needed 24 signatures. I started knocking on doors that Monday evening. My first stop was my next-door neighbor, Tom Richardson. He was in his late 60s, retired, and had lived in the neighborhood for 15 years. The HOA is out of control, Tom said when I explained what happened. Patricia and her crew have been running this place like a dictatorship for 3 years. I will sign your petition. Do you know anyone else who might be interested? Half the neighborhood. You are not the first person they have targeted. Tom was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I collected 47 signatures. People came out of the woodwork with stories about Patricia, Denise, and Sharon. They had fined a single mother $300 because her son's bicycle was visible in her front yard. They had threatened to put a lien on an elderly couple's home because their fence was 6 inches too tall. They had denied a request for a wheelchair ramp, claiming it was not aesthetically consistent with neighborhood standards. I filed the petition with the HOA management company on a Friday afternoon. By Saturday morning, Patricia was at my door, pounding so hard I thought she might break it. "You think you can remove me?" she screamed when I opened the door. "I have given 3 years of my life to this community. You parked in my garage without permission and have been harassing me ever since," I said calmly. "This is the consequence. I will bury you in legal fees. I will make sure you never have a moment of peace in this neighborhood. Are you threatening me, Patricia? I am promising you." I held up my phone, showing her that I was recording. Her face went pale and she stormed off. The special election was scheduled for 3 weeks later. During that time, Patricia and her board ramped up their campaign of harassment. I received violation notices daily. My car was keyed one night while parked in my driveway. Someone threw eggs at my house. I installed security cameras and caught Denise Murphy on video dumping trash on my lawn at 2 in the morning. I turned the footage over to the police. Denise was charged with criminal mischief, a misdemeanor. She claimed she was sleepwalking, which nobody believed. The night before the election, someone tried to break into my garage. My alarm system scared them off, but they left behind a crowbar with fingerprints. The police ran them and got a hit. Marcus Hoffman, Patricia's husband. Marcus was arrested and charged with attempted burglary. Patricia claimed he was just trying to retrieve something he thought he left there, but the police were not buying it. The story made the local news. HOA president's husband arrested for attempted break-in was not a great headline 3 days before an election. The special election had a massive turnout. 83 homeowners showed up to vote, the highest attendance in Meadowbrook Estates history. When the votes were counted, Patricia, Denise, and Sharon were removed from the board by a margin of 71-12. A new board was elected that same night. Tom Richardson became president. A school teacher named Jennifer Walsh became vice president. A retired engineer named David Kumar became treasurer. Their first official act was to rescind all fines issued in the past 6 months and to launch a full audit of HOA finances. That audit revealed something stunning. Over the past 3 years, Patricia, Denise, and Sharon had embezzled nearly $60,000 from the HOA fund. They had been submitting fake invoices for services never rendered, inflating costs for legitimate repairs, and paying themselves consulting fees that were never approved. Tom called me the day the audit was completed. "Austin, you need to see this." I went to his house and looked over the documents. The evidence was overwhelming. Invoices from landscaping companies that did not exist, receipts for snow removal services that were never performed, checks made out to shell companies registered to family members of the board members. "We need to call the police," I said. "Already did. They are sending detectives tomorrow." The investigation moved quickly. Patricia, Denise, and Sharon were all arrested within a week and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. The local news covered the story extensively. Former HOA board members accused of stealing thousands ran for 3 consecutive days, but I was not done. I wanted to make sure they understood exactly what they had put me through. Remember those heated garage spaces they had been using? During the investigation, it came out that Patricia, Denise, and Sharon had been parking in my garage since early November. They had copied my garage door code from the management company's records, which was itself a violation of privacy laws. They had also been using my electricity to keep their cars warm and had racked up hundreds of dollars on my utility bill. The management company admitted fault and reimbursed me, but the principle of the matter burned. After the arrests, the temperatures in Minneapolis dropped even further. We hit a cold snap that lasted 2 weeks, with daytime highs barely reaching 5 degrees and nighttime lows dropping to -30 with wind chill. Local news warned people to avoid unnecessary outdoor exposure and to make sure their vehicles were properly winterized. Patricia, Denise, and Sharon were all out on bail awaiting trial. Their vehicles, which had been cozy and warm in my heated garage all season, now sat in their own driveways, exposed to the brutal elements. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Patricia's Lexus would not start for 3 days straight. The battery had frozen, and she had to pay for a tow and extensive repairs. Denise's BMW suffered a cracked engine block from the cold. Sharon's Mercedes needed a new battery and had issues with frozen brake lines. Meanwhile, my garage kept sedan started perfectly every morning. I made sure to pull out of my heated garage slowly each day, right around the time I knew Patricia left for work. She would be standing in her driveway, bundled in layers, desperately trying to get her car started while I drove past in comfort. The petty satisfaction was immense, but the real justice came at trial. The prosecution had an airtight case. Bank records, forged invoices, email correspondence discussing how to hide the money. Patricia's husband Marcus had already taken a plea deal on his attempted burglary charge and was cooperating with prosecutors. The trial lasted 3 days. I was called as a witness to testify about the garage situation and how the harassment campaign began. I brought my documentation, photos of the cars in my garage, violation notices, recordings of Patricia's threats, security footage of Denise dumping trash on my lawn. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Patricia, Denise, and Sharon were found guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Patricia received 4 years in prison and was ordered to pay $23,000 in restitution. Denise got 3 years and owed $19,000. Sharon received 2.5 years and owed $18,000. Additionally, all 3 were banned from serving on any HOA board in Minnesota for life. Marcus Hoffman received 6 months in jail and 2 years probation for the attempted burglary. The day of sentencing, I sat in the courtroom and watched as Patricia was led away in handcuffs. She looked at me once, her face a mixture of rage and defeat. I did not grin or show any satisfaction. I just nodded once, a simple acknowledgement that actions have consequences. After the trial, Meadowbrook Estates underwent significant changes. The new HOA board revised the bylaws to include stricter oversight and term limits. They implemented quarterly financial audits. They created a homeowner bill of rights that protected against retaliatory fines and harassment. Tom Richardson turned out to be an excellent president. He was fair, transparent, and actually cared about making the neighborhood better rather than wielding power over residents. I got to know many of my neighbors during the whole ordeal. We formed a kind of informal support group for people who had been targeted by the previous board. Some residents were able to get their fines refunded. Others finally got approval for home improvements that had been unreasonably denied. The management company that had given Patricia access to my garage code was fired and replaced with a more reputable firm that took privacy and security seriously. They installed new protocols that prevented board members from accessing private information without explicit permission and documentation. My attorney Robert Chen sent me a final bill with a note that said, "Best HOA case I have ever handled. Thank you for seeing it through." The total legal fees came to about $8,000, but the HOA's insurance ended up covering most of it as part of a settlement. The insurance company was not happy about having to pay out for board member malfeasance and dropped coverage for Meadowbrook Estates entirely. The new board had to shop around for a new policy, which everyone agreed was a good thing. The fresh start extended to every aspect of the community. Spring came to Minneapolis, and with it, the snow melted away to reveal green lawns and blooming flowers. I spent my weekends working in my garage, now secure and private once again. I had installed new locks, changed all the codes, and added additional security measures. Nobody would be using my space without permission ever again. One Saturday morning in May, I was working on a woodworking project in my garage when Tom stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "Thought you might want some company," he said. We sat in lawn chairs in my garage, the door open to let in the warm spring breeze, and talked about how different the neighborhood felt. "You know," Tom said, "a lot of people were too scared to stand up to Patricia. She had been in power so long, we all just accepted that this was how things were. You showing up and refusing to back down changed everything." "I just wanted to park in my own garage," I said. "Yeah, well, your garage sparked a revolution." We laughed about that. It seemed absurd that 3 expensive cars and a heated garage had led to embezzlement charges, arrests, trials, and prison sentences. But that was the reality of what happened when people with a little bit of power decided they were above the rules. In June, I received a letter from Patricia's attorney. She wanted to apologize and hoped I would consider writing a letter to the parole board supporting early release. I read the letter twice, then fed it into my paper shredder. Some people might think I should have been the bigger person and offered forgiveness. But Patricia had not just inconvenienced me. She had harassed me, threatened me, stolen from the entire community, and sent her husband to break into my home. Forgiveness requires genuine remorse and changed behavior. A letter from an attorney asking for parole consideration was neither. Besides, she had barely served 3 months of her 4-year sentence. She could wait. Life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable rhythm. The new HOA board focused on actual community improvement rather than petty enforcement of arbitrary rules. They organized neighborhood events, negotiated better rates for shared services like snow removal and landscaping, and created a reserve fund for emergency repairs to common areas. I started dating a woman named Linda James who lived 3 streets over. She had been one of the people who signed my petition and had her own horror stories about Patricia's HOA reign of terror. Linda worked as an architect and had been denied permission to add a sunroom to her house because Patricia thought it would set a precedent for unauthorized expansions. The design was fully compliant with city code and would have increased my property value, Linda told me over dinner one night. But Patricia rejected it because she liked having that power. With the new board, Linda resubmitted her sunroom proposal. It was approved within 2 weeks. We spent several summer evenings sitting in her new sunroom, drinking wine and talking about how strange it was that an HOA could make or break a person's happiness in their own home. "I almost moved," Linda admitted. "I had a realtor lined up and everything. But then you started the petition, and I thought maybe things could actually change." "I am glad you stayed," I said. By autumn, the criminal restitution payments started coming in. The court had garnished wages from all 3 women who were working prison jobs making pennies per hour. It would take years for them to pay back what they stole, but at least the money was going back to the community. The new HOA board used the recovered funds to make actual improvements. They repaved the community walking paths, updated the playground equipment at the neighborhood park, and hired a proper management company that did not cut corners. In October, I attended the annual HOA meeting. The atmosphere was completely different from the horror stories I had heard about meetings under Patricia's rule. People actually smiled. There was productive discussion about budget allocations and community priorities. When someone raised a concern, Tom and the board listened and worked toward solutions rather than issuing fines. During the open forum section, a homeowner named Margaret Chen stood up. She was an elderly woman who lived alone at the end of Oak Street. "I just want to thank Austin Zimmerman," she said, her voice wavering slightly. "Last year, Patricia fined me $600 because my hedges were 3 inches too tall. I am on a fixed income and that fine nearly broke me. I was terrified of that woman." What Austin did took courage, and it freed all of us. The room broke into applause. I felt my face flush with embarrassment but also with pride. I had not set out to be a neighborhood hero. I just wanted to park in my own garage and be left alone. But sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Winter returned to Minneapolis, bringing with it the same brutal cold and snow that had started this whole mess a year earlier. But this time, when I pulled into my garage each night, I did so with the peace of mind that nobody would be trespassing on my property. My garage was mine, heated and secure, just as it should be. I thought about Patricia, Denise, and Sharon sometimes, sitting in their cells while Minnesota winter raged outside. I wondered if they scraped ice off windshields in the prison parking lot, if they thought about the heated garage they had illegally used, if they felt any remorse for what they had done. Probably not. People like that rarely do, but it did not matter. Justice had been served, the community had been made whole, and I could finally enjoy my home in peace. On a particularly cold morning in January, 1 year to the day after I found those 3 cars in my garage, I stood in my heated workspace with a cup of coffee and smiled. My truck started instantly because it had been kept warm overnight. Outside, the temperature was -15, with a wind chill of -35. The kind of cold that makes your face hurt within seconds of exposure. Somewhere, Patricia's Lexus was probably frozen solid in a prison parking lot, if she even still owned it. Denise's BMW might have been repossessed to pay for her restitution. Sharon's Mercedes was likely gathering dust in a storage unit, waiting for its owner to finish her sentence. Meanwhile, I was warm, comfortable, and surrounded by my tools and projects in my private, heated garage. The space I had paid for, upgraded, and fought to keep. Tom stopped by that morning with fresh donuts from the bakery on Main Street. 1-year anniversary of the Great Garage Rebellion, he said with a grin. Figured we should celebrate. We stood in my garage, eating donuts and drinking coffee, talking about the upcoming spring and the plans the HOA board had for community improvements. "You ever regret any of it?" Tom asked. "The fight, the lawyers, all the stress." I thought about the question seriously. It had been a difficult year. There were nights I could not sleep, worried about what Patricia and her cronies might do next. There were moments I questioned whether it was worth the effort. There were times I considered just paying the fines and moving to a neighborhood without an HOA. But then I thought about Margaret Chen and her hedge fine, about the single mother whose son could not leave his bike out, about Linda and her sunroom, about all the people who had been bullied and harassed by a power-hungry HOA board that thought they were untouchable. "No regrets," I said. "Not a single one." Tom raised his coffee cup. "To heated garages and neighborhood revolutions." I clinked my cup against his. "And to consequences for people who abuse their power." We finished our donuts as snow began to fall outside, light flakes drifting down in the still morning air. My garage door was closed, the heater humming quietly, keeping the temperature at a perfect 55 degrees. Everything was exactly as it should be. The legal saga had officially ended 3 months prior, when all appeals were exhausted, and the sentences became final. Patricia would remain in prison until late 2027, Denise until mid-2027, and Sharon until summer 2027. Their restitution payments would continue long after their release. The community had moved on, healed, and become stronger. Property values in Meadowbrook Estates actually increased after the new board took over, as word spread that this was a neighborhood with fair governance and reasonable rules. I continued my relationship with Linda, and we talked about moving in together. Her sunroom had become my favorite spot in her house, and my garage had become her favorite spot in mine. She appreciated good craftsmanship and the principle of standing up for your rights. "You know what I love about your garage story?" Linda said one evening as we sat in lawn chairs, watching me sand a bookshelf I was building. "You did not start out wanting to take down the whole board. You just wanted your space back. But when they pushed, you pushed back harder. That is what bullies never expect." She was right. Patricia, Denise, and Sharon had operated on the assumption that homeowners would just comply, that the threat of fines and harassment would be enough to keep people in line. They never imagined someone would actually read the bylaws, lawyer up, and hold them accountable. Their mistake had cost them their freedom, their reputations, and their financial security. My persistence had earned me peace, justice, and a pretty great girlfriend who appreciated heated garages as much as I did. As spring turned to summer and summer back to fall, life continued its normal rhythm. The HOA board functioned smoothly under Tom's leadership. Neighborhood events were well attended and actually fun. People fixed up their homes without fear of arbitrary fines. Kids played in yards without their parents worrying about bicycle violations. It was, simply put, how a neighborhood should be. I ran into Marcus Hoffman once, about 18 months after everything went down. He had completed his jail sentence and probation and was working at a hardware store in downtown Minneapolis. He looked older, tired, and when he saw me, he actually approached. "Austin," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. What I did was wrong. What Patricia had me do was wrong." I should have known better. I studied his face. He seemed genuine, not trying to make excuses or shift blame. "I appreciate that," I said. "I hope you are doing better." "I am. Divorced Patricia while she was inside, getting my life back together. For what it is worth, she still blames you for everything. Cannot accept that she brought it on herself." I was not surprised. People like Patricia never take responsibility. "Well, I hope you find some peace," I said. We shook hands and I left with my lumber and supplies. That brief encounter was closure I had not known I needed. Marcus had been a pawn in Patricia's schemes, but he had also been an adult who made his own choices. He was paying his debt and trying to move forward. I could respect that. Patricia, on the other hand, was still fighting her conviction from prison, filing appeals that went nowhere, claiming she was the victim of a conspiracy. The local newspaper had done a follow-up story 6 months into her sentence, and she had used the interview to blame everyone but herself. The community, the new HOA board, the judge, the jury, and especially me. "Austin Zimmerman ruined my life over a parking disagreement," she was quoted as saying. The newspaper's comment section had been brutal in response. People who knew the full story eviscerated her claims. Even people who had never met her could see through the manipulation and victim playing. But again, it did not matter. She was in prison, I was free, and justice had been properly served. 2 years after the whole ordeal began, Tom decided to step down as HOA president. He had done an excellent job, but at his age, he wanted to travel and spend time with grandchildren. The neighborhood held another election. This time, Linda ran for president and won easily. I was proud of her, and I knew she would continue the work of keeping Meadowbrook Estates a fair and well-managed community. On her first day as president, she called me with a laugh in her voice. Guess what I found in the HOA files? What? A letter from Patricia to the management company, dated 2 days before you found the cars in your garage. She specifically requested your garage code, claiming there was a suspected gas leak and they needed access for safety inspection. That is how she got in. Yep. And the management company just handed it over without verifying the claim or notifying you. We are implementing new protocols to make sure that never happens again. It was a small detail, but it confirmed what I had suspected all along. Patricia had not just stumbled upon the opportunity to use my garage. She had deliberately sought access, lied to get it, and then tried to justify her trespassing with made-up HOA votes and bylaw interpretations. The level of entitlement and deception was staggering, but at least now the full truth was documented. Life continued to improve in Meadowbrook Estates under Linda's leadership. She brought fresh ideas, maintained the accountability standards Tom had established, and actually listened to homeowners. The neighborhood became a model for how HOAs should operate, and Linda was even invited to speak at a local government meeting about HOA reform. I attended her speech and felt immense pride as she talked about the importance of transparency, accountability, and respecting property rights. She used our situation as a case study, explaining how unchecked HOA power can lead to corruption and abuse. HOAs serve an important function, Linda told the assembled council members and citizens. But they must be balanced with homeowner rights and proper oversight. What happened in our community was a cautionary tale, but also a success story. When residents stand up for their rights and demand accountability, positive change is possible. The speech was well received, and several other HOA communities reached out to Linda for advice on implementing similar reforms. As for me, I continued to enjoy my home, my garage, and my relationship with Linda. I built furniture in my heated workshop, hosted neighborhood barbecues in the summer, and lived peacefully in a community that had learned valuable lessons about power, accountability, and respect. Every winter, when the Minnesota cold descended and my garage stayed warm and comfortable, I thought about how differently things could have turned out. If I had just accepted the violation fines, if I had not read the bylaws, if I had not fought back, Patricia and her cronies would still be in power, still be embezzling, still be harassing residents. But I did fight back. I stood my ground, and an entire community was better for it. 3 years after finding those cars in my garage, Patricia was released from prison. She moved to Wisconsin, unable to face the community she had betrayed. Denise and Sharon followed suit after their releases, scattered to different parts of the Midwest, their lives forever changed by their choices. I never saw any of them again, and I was perfectly fine with that. Meadowbrook Estates thrived. Property values continued to climb. New families moved in, attracted by the fair governance and strong community spirit. The story of the HOA reform became neighborhood lore, passed along to new residents as an example of what can be accomplished when people refuse to be bullied. And every cold morning I pulled my car out of my heated garage, warm and comfortable, knowing that I had fought for what was right and won. The satisfaction never got old. Tom once told me that I had sparked a revolution. I disagreed then, and I still do now. I did not start a revolution. I simply refused to let someone take what was mine. The revolution came from everyone else who found courage in that refusal, who saw that fighting back was possible and worthwhile. That is the real lesson of the whole experience. One person standing up can inspire dozens more. One act of defiance against injustice can topple an entire corrupt system. And one heated garage can change an entire community. As I write this from my workbench on a cold February evening, my garage at a comfortable 55 degrees while outside the temperature hovers at -10, I feel nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for Tom and his early support, for Robert Chen and his legal expertise, for the 47 people who signed my petition, for Linda and her love, and for everyone who stood up and said enough was enough. The cars that Patricia, Denise, and Sharon parked in my garage without permission are long gone, sold or repossessed or rotting in impound lots. My garage remains mine, heated and secure, a symbol of property rights respected and justice served. And every morning when I start my car with the push of a button, no scraping ice or waiting for the engine to warm up, I smile knowing that Patricia, wherever she is, probably has to scrape her windshield in the cold. That small bit of daily inconvenience is nothing compared to the years she spent in prison, but it is still a reminder that actions have consequences. She used my heated garage all season without permission. I evicted her cars and held her accountable for her crimes. Now she freezes every morning, literally and metaphorically, living with the consequences of her choices while I live in comfort and peace. Justice is not always swift, and it is not always easy, but when it finally comes, it is absolutely worth the fight.